Where are we? I don't know. We're here. We're there. We're everywhere. Some of us are close together. Some of us aren't. Hello?
Hello, welcome to Untitled.mov. I'm Marks.
I'm Matt.
I knew that was going to happen. Perfect. I'm Marks, that's Jamie, that's Cameron, that's Matt. Anyway.
There was a game they always made us play where you had to count to a number, and if you both said the number at the same time, you had to start again. It feels a lot like that.
Except we also can't see each other.
What happened in the past month?
First of all, this happened.
Our friends over at WiseTV had a bit of a calamity. TLDR. Here's an Untitled.mov top tip. If you have a domain, make sure that the email on the registrar account is one that exists and people check. And if you change the email on it for whatever reason, always assume that they're going to send you an email to double check that it's valid and actually acknowledge that email. Because if you don't, then what happened to our friends over at YSTV happens, where the domain just gets deleted, temporarily suspended. And so it was over a weekend with several important productions, including one on the Monday when we weren't quite sure what was going to happen. So YSTV's Equality and Inclusion Officer debate night running order was prepared on Untitled's Badger. The next item that we have on our running order that producer Cameron has lovingly prepared for us is just labelled Matt Strat's package. Matt, do you want to tell us about your package?
You know, I was in the market for some hard storage. I needed some more storage, and, I did the whole PC part picker thing, and I was like, I should, who's cheapest for X amount of space? And I was like, there's a nice 12 terabyte drive on Amazon. It's like an enterprise drive, so, you think, it'd be packaged well and all that stuff. So I bought it, a drive on Amazon, and that is the result. It must have been hard drive packaged normally in one of those big boxes that they put loads of them into foam, and you buy like 20 at a time and that sort of thing. And then they were like, there's 20 drives there, we'll just ship them separately. Straight in the anti-static bag, that's good. And then just chuck it in one of those, book envelope-sized cardboard boxes. Well, it's not even a box, it's a manila envelope, isn't it? And I didn't even want to try that. I didn't even take it out of the packaging. I was like, well, this is going to die at some point in the next some amount of time, probably under warranty.
So not only was it just in one of those little envelopes, I believe, did you not mention that it was also just chucked through your post slot
it's just
door?
Posted through the letterbox, because it didn't say fragile. There was no fragile labelling. There was no nothing on it. Just pure hard drive rattling around inside this cardboard box, posted straight through the letterbox.
Hard drive go clunk.
Yeah.
I was about to say, it's going to hit the deck the minute it goes through your letterbox.
I'm sure it had plenty of things even before that point, but yeah, there's a good meter drop there. That was sad. I put as much effort into them shipping it to me as I put in the message I sent back to them. And you can read it yourself there. Essentially, I said, try harder. Yeah.
So, another Untitled top tip. Package your hard drives appropriately and label them as fragile.
Just don't buy them on Amazon.
That too.
Amazon don't know
Where
what
should we
they're
buy
selling.
hard drives, Matt?
So I used a better person this time. I used Scan, I think.
Other computer hardware stores are available.
Yeah, some are good. Some are not. Scan are relatively good most of the time.
Speaking of relatively good most of the time, another thing that happened in the past month was the NASTA elections. I believe, Cameron, you have the results, don't you?
Yes, well, I am happy to say that I have been appointed the Regional Development Officer for Yorkshire and the North East.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Bossman, do you want to explain that?
Well, I went on a little family holiday to Tunisia. And there happened to be an online event going on while I was in Tunisia, which I, of course, as the technical officer for NASTA, offered to sort out the Zoom for. Now, what I didn't realize when I started it is my phone. Basically, I was on my phone at the evening entertainment, and I had it just on the table. And yeah, it turns out it made me join when starting. It made me join it whilst everyone else was filing in with my camera on, which meant I just appeared centrally to everyone, which is the video that is currently on loop. I suddenly realized, panicked, turned my camera off, then kicked myself to not be on the screen. It was quite the kerfuffle and very funny.
So, I have had a personal website for a very long time, and one thing that I've noticed is that I've always wanted to tinker with it, maybe a little bit too much, possibly to the point of not spending longer tinkering with it than actually producing content for it. So, I decided to redo it again, but this time do it a little bit more simply. Get an off-the-shelf content management system, and just kind of one that lets me customize it enough while not going too much. So this is Mark's Wiki. It is my new personal website running off of MediaWiki, which you will know as the piece of software that powers Wikipedia and all the other Wikimedia sites. Reasons for choosing MediaWiki is that it's very flexible. It starts off with a sort of rigid base, but you can put in skins and extensions galore. I'm reasonably familiar with it. I even have, I think, 4 commits. I think I have 2 commits in the MediaWiki core, and 2, though one is a backport of the other, and then 2 in an extension, because back at YSTV I used to look after our MediaWikis, and we use, a little bit of a tangent, but we use PostgreSQL, which is a very good database, but not the one that most media wikis run on. Most wikis run on MySQL, and so the bulk of the testing is done on MySQL, less so on PostgreSQL, which means that when upgrading, we ran into a couple bugs that, to my knowledge, people hadn't seen before. So, being good open source citizens, we reported them, and for one, somebody else put in a fix. For another, I went, you know what, I'm just going to fix this myself, see how hard it is. It wasn't too bad. Anyway, so that's my personal website. It's still very much under construction, because, once again, sort of in a self-fulfilling prophecy, I've spent longer setting it up than putting content on it. You can read more about the tech stack that powers it on the wiki, but in short, it is Kubernetes, because cloud native, running on a ARM virtual machine hosted by Oracle Cloud, which I use because it's free, and that's about the only reason.
And what kind of articles can we look forward to reading on Mark's Wiki?
Well, for one, I need an updated About Me page, because my old website barely had one, so I feel like I should put a little bit there. Hopefully, I'd like to also start writing a bit about the sort of tech I use in the day-to-day, / just general blogging stuffs, though I'm going to need to make MediaWiki work as a blogging engine for that, which is going to be a little bit interesting. But look forward to once every 18 months, probably, new content on Mark's Wiki.
Now, Matt and Marks, you were recently involved in a production of Spamalot, weren't you?
Ta-da!
Nice.
Excellent.
Yes. It was much effort. The venue was terrible, and Mark's wasn't terrible. Mark's was very helpful.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Now, you played good contortion game to try and fit in the wings of the non-existent wings of this theatre.
Yeah, we should probably explain. So, this was in a, your typical, I think, council-owned theatre, which is a lot of what you'd expect. And one thing that it was sort of lacking was wing space, and the wing space that we did have was mostly taken up by props, because the show had a lot of custom props, including, I think, a wheelbarrow that is only used for a 10-second visual gag. So my sort of role was, I believe I am credited as assistant sound designer.
Yeah.
Which
I made
essentially
sure
meant that
to
I
make
was...
that happen.
Thank you. So before the shows, I was mainly involved in setting up all the wireless microphones, which you can see behind me there, a shot of microphone table with my lovingly laid out LX tape marking so that I could immediately see which of the microphones had been given out to cast, which ones hadn't been. And then during the show, I essentially, after the first one, sort of took on the role of... Because one of the problems that we we're having is that we needed foldback for the cast to hear themselves sing, because the sort of overriding problem of the sound design for this production was the band are loud, and they're the kind of loud that we can't just turn down.
Yes, I had a lovely fader for the band that only turned down the quiet stuff.
And it was the loud stuff that was problematic, because then we have to push everything else to be louder, and you know what happens when you put too much of amplified sound into an omnidirectional microphone? You get feedback. Not
yummy.
good. So I was essentially battling between pushing the foldback speakers backstage as loud as I could, while not pushing them so hard that it would cause feedback, which also meant that I was backstage to hear them in between all the cast moving in and out during changes. It meant that there were some points when I was holding my iPad with the X32 remote app, just like this, just about moving a fader with my thumb. Should we talk about the mixing setup in this one? Because it was a bit of an interesting one.
Yes, it caused many problems.
So, the primary front of house desk was an X32 full size. You can just about see it in that photo, which was connected via the digital AES-50 Snake to an S32 stage box, which is, I believe, 32 in, 8 out.
16 out.
16 out. Which was mainly driving the wireless mics, as we had, I think, 25 ways of RF plus 3 spare channels on this one. Then, because 32 inputs isn't quite enough for 25 ways of RF and a band, we then brought in an X32 rack, which was itself connected to an S16. So actually the reason that in that photo you can see 2 laptops each running X32 Edit with slightly different views is because each of them is connected to a different mixer. So essentially the band... How did you mix the band on the day? Was it just your iPad?
Yeah, pretty much. I had an iPad off to my side, and then between that and the desk, I had the script on my Google Pixel Slate. No, it's not Pixel Slate or whatever. Google Slate. And then I had a laptop up there that was then controlling running Theatre Mix to actually mix all the audio together. Well, to program the desk so that I can just cue through sound effects and my DCAs. I have whatever mics I need in. And
we don't have time to explain DCA mixing in this episode, but look up Theatre Mix. There's a couple of really good videos on its website explaining. Particularly, I would recommend the video of Adam Savage from Tested and
yes.
Mythbusters talking about how Hamilton is mixed and speaking to the mixing engineers there. It's the same idea, just on a slightly smaller scale, but TLDR, during a show, you might think that the sound mixer just kind of sets some faders and then goes for coffee. No. Completely opposite.
Especially not in that venue. Can't get away with that.
But yeah.
So, I had some fun times with that. As we got into tech rehearsal, we don't have the band because apparently a band are expensive. We can't have them sitting around while they're essentially not playing music for most of the time. So the first time where we actually had to go and play anything and have the band in and have all the mics going was during the dress. And because the venue is shocking, even though I used the preset or the save file from the last time I did a show in that theatre, it was still terrible. So, I kind of threw myself through that. And the other things I found out was, this time, because we knew all the wiring in the venue, I was like, oh, well, I'll just use the, Cat5 Ethicon that's already there, and that'll save me loads of time instead of running Cat5 everywhere. The problem then I found out was that if you chain through an S32 and then you chain into a rack,
and then you chain into an S16.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the problem. I could deal with that one because there's an X32 that kind of you can do whatever you want with. But very much, I tried to send some audio from the main front of house desk to the rack, and the S32 was like, no, that audio is going nowhere, mate. So I then had to run more XLRs to the band rack just so that I could feed in the things. Like, I've got 48 channels in both directions on this cable, but I can't send 2 channels of audio from one place to another. So that was pain. I had to, do some last-minute cable adjustments.
But we made it work.
Yeah, eventually by, I don't know, the 3rd show, things were going all right.
Just in time for me to disappear to London and leave Matt without a sound too.
Yeah, at least, when you do shows in the West End and stuff, they'll have at least a week of just trial runs or like pre-shows or pre-screenings, kind of like in the cinema and stuff. Whereas we have an entire week to do the whole show and then finish the show and get rid of it. That makes not much practice can be had. So, yeah. It's frustrating, but we got there. And I mostly got all the sound effects in the right place.
Speaking of things mostly working, Jamie.
I recently purchased a server rack for our living room, of course. And now, a thing that you need with a server rack is servers. And once you've got servers, you need monitoring. Now, because I work with it at my place of employment, I chose Zymon. Now, I have set up Zymon about 3 separate times now. I know what I'm doing, and I've got it to always work with Slack. Apart from this one time, and I have no idea why, but it just kept spitting out everything I didn't want it to. So I gave up, replaced the whole thing with just the word fuck, and then it started listening to me. So I gave up, and now whenever anything goes down, it just screams fuck, and we have to go figure out what it's trying to tell us. I'm going to fix it at some point, but I've been a little busy.
Now that's what I call site reliability engineering.
I am in the industry.
Speaking of the industry, let's go to a little recurring segment that we've been doing on the show.
Oh god, this is the saga of
the German Doner Kebab in York cannot catch a break.
Yeah, no, this screen has been rotated like 180 degrees. It's a different angle every time I see it. It always has that warning on it. Also, text wrapping in the top left. They just can't catch a break. We've had about 5 pictures of this in a channel where we share all of these. It's crazy.
What's it supposed to display?
Presumably like a list of orders.
Oh, we don't know. It's never shown it. In the last year, I've been past that.
Nice.
Good. Next.
Nice. Next.
This is a Tunisian hotel. That's all you need to know. It happened several times.
This was me on Thameslink. This was a fun one. Turns out those screens are running Firefox.
That looks like a XFCE, I think, icon set. So that's Firefox on Linux.
Then next up, we've got this.
So I said this was reoccurring. There's our evidence. Next.
This is one of yours, wasn't it, Jamie?
Yes, this was the evening entertainment at the Tunisian hotel I was in. They were attempting to use some form of QLab, and then accidentally passed through a Windows 11 background somehow. They just forgot to full screen VLC by the looks of things. So that was quite amusing. They figured it out eventually. This was also Tunisia. I just noticed, I think that's Windows 10 by the looks of things, running on one of the tills, which was amusing.
For God's sake.
We all know what this is. It's a different angle again. This was in Tunisia, at a Tunisian airport again, same as the till. It was running Windows 10. It was Windows 10, I think, with the taskbar, or it might have been 7, but the taskbar on the left-hand side. And I noticed I could just start opening settings because they hadn't locked it down at all. So I just started reading the specs of the PC. I think I opened a couple programs. Got dragged away by the people I was with in the end, who told me to just leave it alone. It does look like a Burger King. As you can see, they're using Chrome, which appears to have either not started up correctly or there's a new update or something in the top right.
It's also very Times New Roman.
I'm also fairly sure that screen is not mounted on the mount in the way that the mount expects you to mount it.
Yes, there's that as well. It's hey, give them credit. It's facing the right way now. This was one I took. I had to get my phone out real quick to get this one because we were about to pull out. But I was getting on the bus with Dan, and we noticed that the stop the times information at the bus stop had a little Windows XP warning, and I thought, well, that's cute. I've got to get a picture of that.
In uni worlds, all of those are completely segregated with their own internet connections. Like,
I know, it's brilliant.
They've got like
next
point-to-point networking to their own
point
ADSL.
across the library. It's brilliant. But yeah, next up is this was co-op. It was just telling me it was loading. I think it was like age specific. I can't read the screen, but I think it was age specific modules for checking ID and whatnot. And it was just funny to see it telling me what modules it was loading as it booted.
For heaven's sake.
Unfortunately, they then got it in the wrong angle again. Very unfortunate. They almost got there, but they have now knocked the screen apparently. So that's not great.
I wonder if it's like very slightly loose and just slowly moves to that position.
Possibly. Here's one from Dizzy from down in London. As you can see, Clapham Junction Station. Asking if their PC wants to be found by other devices on the network. So it's clearly just been plugged in to the network. Here's a long distance shot of the German Doner Kebab. By the way, all of these are probably days apart. Like, they just did not fix this in like a year.
And that is don't use Windows for signage. German Doner Kebab in York, please fix your signage.
I'm going to send them an email.
So we can stop taking photos of it.
Indeed, but now it's time for the news.
First of all, this is a fun one. Russia has fined Google more money than there is in the entire world. 2 undecillion rubles in total, which is a 2 and then that many zeros, which is considerably more than their $2 trillion market cap. And in fact, it's quite a lot more than the entire GDP of the world, which is only 110 trillion.
I believe what happened there is that they had a fine that either doubled or increased or something like that every day for a very long time.
Yes.
And then Google just flat out went, nah.
You see,
It was due to the company restricting Russian state media on YouTube, I believe. And it just kept building. And then obviously it got to this number, which they're obviously not going to pay because they can't.
What if they sell something? They might have some money then.
Yeah, but like, what could they sell off?
Well, they've got a few products. I mean, one that people know the most is probably Chrome.
They could sell that.
You know who agrees with you? The United States Department of Justice, who have asked Google to sell Chrome following a recent ruling in August that said they have a monopoly on search. And it would also ban them from entering the browser market again for another 5 years. And they've even said if that didn't work to break their monopoly, they might have to divest from Android itself.
Which is going to be interesting given how much developer resources Google are putting into both Chrome and Android. Because I wonder what the divestment deal would look like in practice, like what it would do to... I mean, I presume they would form some other company. I don't know if it would be under Alphabet or it would be entirely separate completely, but presumably transfer over all the assets and presumably at least some of the developers as well.
Well, the thing is, these companies are so... I say companies, sorry. These products are so intertwined that separate companies would... I can't see how that could work. I mean... We're going to find out, I imagine, but...
Well, we'll see if this actually pans out. The other interesting thing here is that it would stop Google from making the deal they have with Apple to be the default search engine on iOS.
Which is also going to be interesting for Mozilla, because I believe Google have a deal with Mozilla to be the default search engine on Firefox, and that contributes a not insignificant portion of the Mozilla Corporation's revenue.
Because they've already been having layoffs for the last little bit of... important. Well, they were saying about they had like loads of like teams that would go out and try and advocate for things, and apparently they just can't do that anymore. They're going to come up with some innovative new way of doing it without presumably people or money. So we'll see how that goes.
Now, this is the 3rd show in a row where we've got to talk about MKBHD, who talks about the same things we do, but has several million times more subscribers. And last time, I told you all how contrite he'd been about the whole wallpaper app saga, and that he was really listening and open to the feedback he was getting. And then he went and did 3 times the speed limit in a school zone in one of his latest videos.
In a sports car, I believe.
Yes, he was like driving a Lamborghini at 96 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour school zone. Well done, Marquez. The funniest thing about this as well is that his editors caught it and they blurred out the speedometer in that clip, but they forgot about the passenger speedometer.
For context, the vehicle that he was driving has a speedometer on the passenger side on the dashboard.
Yeah.
So even though the one between, on the driver's dashboard was blurred, you could just look over to the passenger side because it was a POV video and see just the numbers going up to 90.
I found it quite interesting that they only blurred the driver's screen once it went over the speed limit, which then tells you what the speed limit was.
I was going to say, it tells you that, I can still see it's going up. I can hear the engine revving. Therefore, once it hit, what was it, 35, and then it blurs. I'm like, that engine hasn't stopped revving.
Finally, for the news, we've got a fun one here.
So Okta is essentially, their main product is single sign-on for corporations. For those unfamiliar, the idea is that in the morning, you sign into Okta, and then for the rest of the day, as you go about your work, you can sign into everything else that you use, whether that be like your email, your calendaring, various internal applications, and you never have to sign in again because it's all managed through Okta. They had a bit of a security oopsie in the past month where it was possible for an attacker to log in with any password, but only if the account's username was at least 52 characters long, which, A, is not ideal, B, is very specific, and I don't know if Okta have publicly confirmed the reason for it, but the suspicion is that they were using the hashing function bcrypt, which is very commonly used, and it's generally a very good password hashing function, but has a quirk in that I believe either all or nearly all implementations of it truncate their input to a certain length, which means that if you were to hash, I don't know what the exact limit is, but let's call it X. So if you were to hash a string of X characters, you would get a certain hash output, and then if you hash a string any longer than X characters that starts with the same X characters, whatever the others may be, then you'd still get the same output. So presumably what's happened here is that Okta were including in the hash some kind of prefix and then the username, which meant that if that username plus whatever prefix they were using pushed the length of the string over X, then when they included the password as well, it would get truncated, and you would get the same hash no matter what password you would input, which is bad. I believe this has now been fixed, and Okta have publicly disclosed it, but I'm going to continue the trend I started earlier of an untitled top tech top tip. If you're using password hashing algorithms, look into them, and particularly around bcrypt, be mindful of this, because it's a very subtle thing that I believe more modern bcrypt implementations will throw an error if the input string is too long, but there are certainly some out there that will just chop off the input at a certain point.
Time for a new segment now. We have so much Apple news this time. Well, yeah, we talk about Apple a lot, and we talk about Apple so much that it should kind of be its own thing, and now it is. Welcome to Apple Juice, which I'm amazed no one has already used.
Well,
I am amazed there's not an Apple show already on the internet called Apple Juice, but we'll take it.
So, what are we squeezing from the Apple Juice this week? This month?
Excellent. I love how you've continued the metaphor there. Well, first of all, Apple held some announcements a few weeks ago. They announced some new M4 Macs. First of all was the iMac. In addition to the spec bump, there's some new colours, centre stage camera. There's a nano texture glass option, which is quite cool, but that's pretty much it. Then they introduced a new Mac Mini. Now this one's exciting because they shrunk it considerably. It's now like a 5x5 inch. It's just slightly bigger than Apple TV, and it is more powerful than the Mac Studio. This has the M4 and M4 Pro variants available.
And not only is it more powerful, the power consumption on it.
As someone who is in the AV industry, I beg of you, do not use Mac OS for signage.
I mean, we're doing it right now.
Every month it would go, this application needs to run in full screen. Will you allow that?
Okay.
It is the perfect size to be a signage player, but
It is.
let's not go down that road.
The power button, in classic Apple fashion, something has to be wrong with the product that could be totally avoidable. And this one is the power button is not on the back anymore; it's on the bottom. The bottom at the back. So people have already gone to 3D printing land, and they've made a little case that has a very fancy little linkage, so you can press the button from the top. Of course. And
This
then,
brought to you by the people who brought you the Magic Mouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then remade the Magic Mouse again, changed the port on it, and still left it with the port on the bottom.
Though, also interestingly, Apple say that the new Mac Mini is the first fully carbon-neutral Mac.
And then finally, by the way, they held a separate kind of 10-minute mini event for each of these in consecutive days. They announced new MacBook Pros. These have the M4, M4 Pro, and M4 Max variants available. Basically, these computers are all now twice as fast as the M1 ones were, which is kind of twice as fast in 3 years. Considering the massive leap they already had from Intel to Apple Silicon in the first place, it's not bad. These are kind of the first ones where it's justifiable to upgrade from an M1 Mac to these, although it will still be kind of early. The other thing with this is it's been upgraded to Thunderbolt 5, which means it can do 120 gigabit per second I/O. This is a very exciting one for me personally. Final Cut Pro has been updated to version 11, and it's got some cool new features. The headline one is this. Of course, it's an AI feature, had to be, but it's magnetic mask, and so finally you can rotoscope an object without having to spend hours manually drawing it. You can just click a few dots to get it to select, press Analyze in the top corner for it to scan through all the frames, and then you can mask it out really easily. As you'll have seen in the titles for this episode, this is a great feature and a long overdue one.
As someone who spent a very long time manually rotoscoping things, it's a painful process, I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Then they've also introduced auto-transcription to captions. I've had a play, it's alright, the quality is decent, although not quite as good as Whisper is. What it is good at is dividing them up. I don't know whether it's using some of the information it's got about where clips start and end in the timeline, but it is dividing up subtitles pretty much the way I would by hand, which is cool.
That is going to make my life so much easier.
Well, you're gonna have to relearn editing in Final Cut. And have you thrown the Mac out of the window yet?
Well, Final Cut, brilliant software, love it. And this feature will be incredibly handy for my work. I have to now and again, for accessibility reasons, put subtitles at the bottom. And this, burnt-in subtitles, and this would be brilliant. But I have to use Mac OS to do that, and I want to throw it out the window.
Yeah. Anyway, the other thing they've added is spatial video editing, so videos that are captured on Vision Pro or your iPhone, yeah. I mean, you can add titles and stuff to those, which previously there was no way to do. The thing I'm most excited about is a very niche, nerdy feature called media extensions that were added at the system level in macOS Sequoia, and now they're part of Final Cut, which means third-party developers can finally add support for different file formats. So I can't tell you the number of times someone has given me an MKV and I've had to run it through Handbrake so that I can edit it in Final Cut. Now, finally, someone will be able to write an extension that just makes it natively support it, and I've had the same issues with B-Raw in the past as well. And hopefully, it's been a long journey, but finally you'll be able to edit B-Raw natively in Final Cut.
That's actually really handy. That will save me so much time.
Now, bearing in mind this is just the API, it's not adding support for all those codecs yet. It's adding the support for adding the support for those codecs.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Now, sticking with Apple's Pro apps, this is now an Apple Pro app. This is Pixelmator. This is what I use. This is also very personally exciting because this is what I use for graphic design and image editing.
Is it your passion, Cameron?
And it's been the most Apple-like third-party app that is out there, from the kind of human interface design to the website and the branding and everything. And now it finally is an Apple app because they've acqui-hired it. They say, no immediate changes coming, but hopefully this means it's brilliant software. It's so easy to use and it's as powerful as Photoshop in almost every way. And, hopefully that means it reaches a much bigger audience. So congratulations to the folks at Pixelmator. Now, this is a fun news story. Apple has introduced code in the latest version of iOS that will reboot an iPhone after too long, which makes it much harder to brute force the password.
I believe it's after 72 hours of inactivity, the phone will reboot, and the reason that's important is because effectively an iPhone has sort of two states of various bits of the system being decrypted that are referred to as BFU and AFU for before first unlock and after first unlock. Essentially, until you enter your passcode for the first time after starting up an iPhone, a lot of the things are still encrypted because the decryption key for those is held in the secure enclave, which is a separate chip on the phone, and is derived from your passcode. So a lot of your system apps will not be accessible. So I think things like you will get notifications from apps, some of them, but like it won't show the contents, for instance, or like things like end-to-end encrypted messaging won't work. After first unlock, those keys are kept in memory, and so they can show on your lock screen and all that. But essentially what Apple's done is that, seemingly, after 72 hours of inactivity, the phone will reboot and go into before first unlock mode. There was a lot of speculation when this initially started appearing as a thing. That I think some people even speculated that iPhones can wirelessly tell other iPhones to reboot, which has now been debunked by people reverse engineering the OS. It is just a simple 72-hour timer. But that has made the lives of people trying to dump the content of the phones much harder, because essentially they have a 72-hour window from when they get access to the phone to dump its contents before it goes into BFU mode, and that suddenly becomes a lot harder because everything is encrypted, and they can only decrypt it by getting the passcode and passing it to the secure enclave.
So next up, Mark Gurman has put out a report about Apple's next foray into the smart home market, which is, I'm going to call it HomePad, because that's what everyone has been calling it, and it makes so much sense, because it's a home product, and it's basically a slightly smaller wall-mounted or wall-mountable iPad. And one of the interesting features is that apparently the UI is going to be dynamic based on the proximity sensor, i.e. as you get closer and further away from the device, what it displays will change. And they anticipate it will be used as an intercom for FaceTime calls, music control, all that sort of thing. It'll have a built-in battery and speakers, and it's been described as sort of like two iPhones stuck together, like sort of 6-inch square.
They're just bringing back the iPod Nano, but bigger.
And gaff to your wall.
Yeah, pretty much. Or, it says they'll be basic so you can put it on a nightstand or whatever, or a desk. And I think their vision is that you'll have lots of these all around your home.
Can't wait to have the chargers for all of those. You've got to take them back off the wall, plug them in.
Good point, actually. Yeah.
So there's going to be a USB-C cable running through your wall somehow.
No. It would be MagSafe. So you get an iPhone and you stick that to the home puck, and then you let that charge up, and then you have to go and charge your iPhone again, and then.
Cool, and that's Apple Juice. We're going to move on to another recurring segment next, E equals MC squared plus AI. And we're actually going to start off in the middle of that Venn diagram because we've got another report from Mark Gurman who says that Apple is shockingly readying a LLM-based Siri for 2026. They're planning an unveil next year and then launch in 2026 to try and make it more conversational. Yeah.
26?
Yeah.
OpenAI are going to be running circles around them in 25.
I enjoy how every time we hear anything about Siri, it sounds like they're describing what they said they were going to make the last version ago.
It's very much, this is the thing that will finally fix Siri. All those other times we were lying, I promise, this is the one, this is going to do it, guys. Siri's going to be great now.
If you graphed Siri's smartness as a graph, it starts at 1, and then it goes down over time, and then it jumps back up to 1, and then it goes down a bit. It's never actually going any smarter. It just keeps lowering down, and then it gets back to where it was before. Because now Siri is just like, oh, I'll Google that for you. Oh no, I'll look for it on the web.
No, I'll ask ChatGPT for you.
And staying in the middle of that Apple and AI Venn diagram, I've now got access to iOS 18.2, the beta version, which means, as well as the ChatGPT integration in Siri, I've been able to have a play with Genmoji and image playgrounds. So in general, you're not going to see anything AI generated on title. This is a sample so you can understand how it works. So that on the left is a Genmoji of me. It's taken an image of me and tried to put it in sort of an emoji style. And on the right, this is the output, the terrible, awful slop that that image playgrounds gives you.
Yeah, it's certainly something.
This is going to be on every iPhone. Well, every iPhone for the last 2 years soon.
My mum has a profile picture that looks like one of those. It's not
gosh.
anything like her, but it's a thing, and it looks like that. So does that mean Facebook has beaten Apple to the punch as well?
I mean, yeah. They're kind of promoting it everywhere they can. We saw that last time. It almost makes Genmoji redeemable, because this is so awful that, like, at least, you know, there's a point to that. You can understand why you might want to use those in a message, but hundreds of millions of people are going to have access to this shit. Moving on. Yeah, so this is another way that AI has started to impact things very tangibly in the real world. There was a listing online for a Halloween parade happening in Dublin that was, as it turns out, generated by AI. There was no parade, and that didn't stop all these people from turning up to see it. Apparently they were stuck there over an hour waiting until they figured out what had happened.
It's definitely an interesting case, and I feel like we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming years.
I mean, there's definite shades of the whole Willy Wonka experience. Except at least that was something.
I mean, if you want some more insight into this kind of thing on social media these days, Tantacrawl's got a new video out, and it's long, and it's about the rise and fall of Facebook, and it contains a lot of interesting stuff like this. So you should give that a watch if you've got a lot of time to watch it in.
Next up, this is Minecraft as hallucinated by AI.
Yeah, I had a go at it, and it's kind of interesting because it doesn't have any idea of the game rules. All it has, I believe, is the previous frame, maybe like some frames before that, and then the user's inputs. And it's been trained on a lot of that material, but then you do get some weird things. Like, for instance, the game has no object permanence if you look at the sky, because it forgets what you were looking at before you looked at the sky. And it's possible that if you start, like, jumping around, you get into, like, weird, very weird states.
Yeah, we've moved on. We first had, what was it, loads of famous people, like politicians in the corner, doing like AI-generated live streaming. They're all talking nonsense. And now we've got the AI-generated game to go with it.
I mean, Minecraft as well, like, is nothing sacred? And the answer is no, nothing is sacred, because Paint and Notepad are getting AI functionality too.
Oh no.
Nope.
Just after they get rid of Paint 3D.
Yeah. Paint is getting generative fill and generative erase and all that stuff. And even Notepad, that Sanctuary, is getting writing tools so that you can rewrite and adjust the tone and summarize content in that.
So the Windows administrators that didn't already have Notepad++ in their standard builds are definitely going to have it now.
This is a fun one. This is an Amazon listing that I think you found, Marks.
Yeah, I think I saw it on Threads, which is a loop of... I'm not entirely sure what it is, but the title of the listing is, and I quote, "I apologise, but I cannot complete this task. It requires using trademark brand names which goes against OpenAI use policy. Is there anything else I could assist you with? 10mm by 3m.
My favourite bit is here in the product description. It has written a load of rubbish, and then with a high-performance product name in square brackets. And that keeps coming up in every point.
It must be like sealant, like the sort of thing you would put, not quite, but the sort of thing you would put underneath like the shower window to stop it from leaking underneath. It'd be that, but
it looks
not
more
that.
like tube to me.
Yeah.
Well, the description says that it has a high-resolution display, bringing your favourite movies and multimedia content to life, and that you can stay connected to the go with seamless technology integration.
I think if you use that, you'd have a green screen. There wouldn't be much to it.
Moving on.
To a
More
somewhat more
slop.
depressing item in
Yeah.
this saga. So, the Junior Eurovision Song Contest 2024 took place over the past couple of weeks, and so if you watch Eurovision, you know that before the act, they have normally a 40-second so-called postcard, which is meant to, well, its purpose in the sort of production is to cover the time as the stage crew switch out the staging from one act to another, but it's usually meant to be some sort of snapshot into either the performer's everyday life, or the host country, or the country that the performer is from. So, like in the past, some of my favorite ones were the 2023 ones, which featured snapshots from a place in the UK, a place in Ukraine, because this was the year that the UK was hosting on Ukraine's behalf, and a place in the performer's home country, and sort of weaving them together. But for a junior Eurovision, the postcards were a mix of videos of the performer, bearing in mind that they are children in this case, they are under the age of 18, and AI-generated versions of them. And some of them very questionable, among the most blatant ones being one of the performers having 4 fingers, which is the sort of telltale sign that an image was produced using AI, because it doesn't quite grasp the concept that humans have 5 fingers. Yeah, this is not great. And I really hope that the EBU sees the backlash from this and decides to not implement it in the main show, because a lot of the time, Junior Eurovision has been sort of the testing ground for changes to the running of the main Eurovision Song Contest. So let's hope that this isn't one of them, because this is very much on the rather not on scale for me.
And would you believe they are not the only ones who've replaced artists with AI this month? Because Coca-Cola have AI generated their latest Christmas ad. You can look soulless and devoid of any actual creativity. I want to read out what their spokesperson said, because it's gross. The Coca-Cola company has celebrated a long history of capturing the magic of the holidays in content, film, events and retail activations for decades around the globe. We are always exploring new ways to connect with consumers and experiment with different approaches. This year we crafted films through a collaboration of human storytellers and the power of generative AI. Coca-Cola will always remain dedicated to creating the highest level of work at the intersection of human creativity and technology.
What?
Someone is paying their investor relations team a lot of money to write whatever that was.
And lastly, thank God for this segment, this is a fascinating one. So, we all remember Pokemon Go from 2016, those halcyon days. Everyone was roaming around the streets trying to find Pokemon. Yeah, exactly. And now it's been revealed that Niantic, the developer, are using all the data from its users to build a geospatial AI model.
Who could have seen this
God knows
coming?
what you can imagine what sort of thing that might be used for. Some use is benign, some less so, but they're using all the data from use of that app to create a model that will kind of understand how to navigate the world.
But now it's time for a recurring segment on this show called I went on eBay or Amazon or AliExpress or insert online shopping site here this week or this month, and I bought this. So, I believe we have a few purchases to talk about. Jamie, would you like to go first?
I started off with it must have been a few weeks back now. I was bored late one night, and I was on eBay. And, I think a visual aid will probably explain what happened. But I woke up maybe a week later, I woke up to eBay going, "Hey, please give us £155." And I went, "Whoa, Nelly, why?" And it told me that I'd won a Stream Deck XL, which I have out of the box. The box was empty. You've been fooled by movie magic. I now am the proud owner of a Stream Deck XL that I have owned for a week and have yet to plug in. Don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I have one now. Then, for context, I recently moved into a new house, probably about a month ago. And I've been doing up the networking of the house and whatnot. So one thing I quite desperately needed was a managed switch for my room. We have a managed switch that centrally controls most of our network, but I needed one in my room for the one uplink I have going up there in case I wanted separate VLANs up there. So I bought myself an 8-port TP-Link managed switch, which I have also, Movie Magic, lied to you, and it's actually not in the box. So this is what I've got. But both of these things, I'm going to play with in my own time. This is endless fun, one of these. Don't need a Nintendo variety, you just need one of these. Then next up, I got this for free through just a trading platform where, people give each other free stuff. I have a DJ deck now that I am probably very unlikely to use. With the glaring exception of I might use it as a replay controller in vMix at some point with Wise TV. So, I have that. It's quite hefty. It's pretty cool. And then finally, today I actually went to an in-person shop. I believe it's known colloquially as IKEA. And I bought a whole host of... I've just dropped most of them on my sofa. But I bought a smart plug, right? They're pretty cool. They're Zigbee enabled, which means I can have a little Zigbee adapter plugged into my server and it can speak to them. So I bought one and I went, oh, well, that one could be used to power, I don't know, the light in my room. So, I might need another one. Just to power like my PC setup on my desk. That's quite important. And I was like, do you know what? I could actually use another one for like the light downstairs. So, that's a third one, obviously. And then, of course, when you have these things, what if I want to plug my phone into charging something and turn that off remotely? So, I of course bought a fourth. But, what if my phone's dead and I can't access, the website to control these? So obviously you need a smart switch. So, I bought one of those and that's going to go on my wall. And then I was like, well, my light switch, this is a weird quirk of my house. It's behind my bedroom door. So I was like, do you know what? While I'm buying things, I may as well buy another switch to control my light and put it in a place that makes sense. So I then walked out of IKEA with a whole host of smart things. And this isn't even the end of it. I'm probably going to end up going back at some point, or at least order online. And the funniest thing of all of this is these are all Zigbee enabled. And I do not own a Zigbee dongle yet. So these are completely useless to me.
Excellent.
I have also played this game. Here are the spares that haven't gone into deployment yet.
So yeah, that's what I got up to this week. Oh, I also bought a media controller for an Xbox One. This cost me £7. It works over IR when pointed at an Xbox One because I don't own an Xbox One controller despite owning an Xbox One. We were previously just plugged a keyboard into it. So this is what we have now.
So instead of buying an actual game controller, you just bought the DVD remote for it.
Well, yeah, the Xbox One is our YouTube and Spotify player.
Brilliant.
It has one job, and it's not games.
Matt, what have you bought
this
week, or this month?
Yeah, so I went on eBay this month. Because of this show is of course showing off the fact that this isn't true, and I buy things without too much actual sensible requirements. But we've been doing these shows across the country, and I've been doing other stuff, and other random gigs and sits probes and things. So I continuously used to take my digital Behringer XR mixer in and out of my rack at home, having to take all the cables out, plug them all back in the right place, reload the presets and everything, just so that I could take it apart again at the next gig. And I was like, surely there's a better way. And I was also like, I can get better audio quality out of this, because Behringer, not known for the highest quality of preamps, and when you're doing shenanigans like I have,
but Matt, they're Midas.
Midas is ones they made for Behringer, which are, if you see a teardown, not the same.
It's like giving your brother the Xbox remote that isn't plugged.
Sure.
So I was like scouring through eBay, trying to see if I could get better audio quality for my system at home, and also have something else that I don't have to take out of the rack. And so I found this cool thing called an Edirol M16DX, and it's rather groovy. It's, I don't know how old it is. I think the last software update was like 2008, but it's, you know, it works. It has Windows 10 drivers somehow. I checked that before I bought it because I've been screwed by that one before. Yeah, it's a cool little rack mount mixer with 16 channels, and then it has a controller which is separate. Unfortunately, I've cable managed it a bit too well to my desk, so I can't lift it up and show you. But it means that I can have a setup at home that stays at home, set up the way that it's supposed to be at home, and I'm using that now so that I can hear the call, and I can hear myself, and I could be listening to music for all you know, but then I can send something completely random to other people.
Is it this one?
There you go. Yeah, it's got a cute little LCD with like VU meters on it and everything. It's super cool. And so I've finally, well, I thought, I've got the perfect setup. It's got digital input, it's got digital output, so I can have a volume control that doesn't affect. There's no analog in the chain. And then I find out that my the end DAC that I was going to use to plug into the speakers can't handle optical audio. Like, it has a port, and there is one device in my house that outputs the correct like jitter so that it works, and every other device it just can't deal with. And that's sad, because I've been trying all different combinations of trying to get digital in and out of the damn thing, and it sounds like I need a new DAC. But I don't want to get a new DAC because it's probably going to do the same thing as this one. So, shenanigans have ensued, and I'll probably be buying more random hardware on eBay trying to solve this problem. Because when it works, and you've got digital all the way through the pipeline, sounds mint.
Let's go for something a little bit more interesting. So, Matt, I believe you've been on a sort of rotating shopping list of music streaming services, trying basically all of them. Do you want to talk a bit about your findings?
Yeah, so this has come up because a long time ago, I was a Spotify person, like everyone else was. And, I don't know, originally the student free trial or the student deal ran out. And I was like, okay, let's see what else there is. Because Spotify doesn't have a hi-fi tier, despite the fact that for the last 10 years, or at least like 6 years, they've been saying, oh yeah, we're going to do it. And they keep saying they're going to do it, and it's had about 5 different names, and it still hasn't existed yet. So I did this a few years ago, where I tried out all the streaming services to see all the features they had, and I essentially settled on Deezer because it's got a hi-fi tier, and slightly after I upgraded to that, they actually made the hi-fi tier the same price as the normal one. They didn't tell me that. I had to figure that one out and change my subscription. But anyway, so I spent 2 years on Deezer, and generally works quite nice. However, Spotify, being the juggernaut that they are, has kind of forced Deezer, and they've got smaller user base, but their smaller user base meant that, you know, they just kept with the basic normal features and the hi-fi, and it was good. Now they kind of, you know, they're trying to go down the route of, we need to do all these like concerts and quizzes and like Deezer Wrapped, Spotify Wrapped clone thing. And they've spent more time doing that than actually making the service work. And so over time, and especially now that I've now got a vehicle that has Android Auto in it, I'm like, I want to be able to use it in that. And in theory, it supports it. But the reliability is getting worse by X amount of time. And I was like, I've had 2 years or maybe even 3 years at this point of Deezer. Let's see what the market's like now. So, signed up to Spotify. Started a trial again. You know, if you've got loads of email addresses, you can do that. And the first thing that hit me with Spotify was it's pop music. It's always pop music, and they've added like stories, and they've added like videos, and like animated artwork, and they still don't have a hi-fi tier. And on the iPad that I have, that I was given this old iPad, it's kind of finished getting new features, but there's still security updates for it. So I'm like, I'll just put that on my desk, and I'll use that as a dedicated media player. And it runs slow. Like, Spotify used to work on an iPod Touch, and this iPod Touch had 512 meg of RAM. Now this iPad, that has infinitely more CPU and 8 times as much RAM, it just can't hack it. It's trying to do all these silly videos and lyrics and stuff, and it just ran really slowly. So I was like, well, that's kind of the only cool thing that Spotify really has is that you can it syncs your now playing state between your device, your phone, your iPad, and whatever, and you can fire music to which one of these things, and it all kind of works. But otherwise, wasn't feeling it. So okay, I tried some other ones. I got an iPad here. I'll try Apple Music. Apple Music, for at least the iPad that I have, is more reliable on my Android phone than on iOS.
Good.
And it also has the lovely benefit that it's a built-in app into iOS, which means that they can't update it unless you update iOS, which this iPad will not do. And crossover, where it kind of, or crossfade between the music, for some reason isn't in iOS 16. It was in previous ones, and it was in the latest ones. But Apple Music on iOS 16 doesn't have crossfade. And I was like, I swear it was in this menu. And I went to go and find some documentation, and it literally just says, if this feature does not show on your device, update your device. I can't. So that was kind of a bust. But they do have a hi-fi tier. So I did try and see what it was like, and in classic Apple fashion, it's really weirdly migrated iTunes and my playlists over. So I ended up with either no history or anything, or I turn on whatever their confusingly named feature is that syncs with iCloud, and suddenly I have lots of playlists with things I can't play in them. So that wasn't very good. And as I say, it was less reliable on my iPad than it was on my Android phone. So that was a bit of a mess. So I went. I've got pre-existing knowledge of Amazon because my dad has it because he's got Prime, and that seems to decide to play more imitation or cover music than actual real music. And I kind of fell, and I think their hi-fi tier you'd still have to upgrade for, and I'm like, eh. So I came back to Tidal, and I gave Tidal a go, and they have this interesting idea where you can either have a 30-day free trial, or you spend £2 and get a 2-month trial, which, we'll see what it's like. And compared to when I tried Tidal a couple years ago, they've actually, the algorithm and the way that you find music, and now that they're getting rid of the MQA thing that was kind of compressed lossless, but not really, it now just plays native FLACs. And the new onboarding system is really cool, and it does the Apple Music thing of showing you all these artists, and you can click an artist, and then it's got shows more artists like that, and you can click around, you end up with lots of music preloaded. And it plays nice on my iPad, and it plays nice on my mobile phone, on my Android phone. And then I try it in the car. And in the car, it doesn't work with Android Assistant or Google Assistant. So while you're driving, you sort of can't tell it to do anything.
Well,
it will either play what you were already playing before you got in the car, or you can go. It turns out it does have CarPlay, Android Auto support, and you can click into a menu and then click into another menu, and then you get a search bar which you can only speak into. And at that point, you can ask it to play things, and then it will give you a list that's generally what you asked for. It seemed fairly good at that, and then it will play it. And so I've generally kind of got the Tidal as my favourite. But yeah, it doesn't have Android Assistant, which is kind of annoying. And I had a lovely video I took the other day of it just not playing the track it said it was playing, which was good. And of course, when you go forward and then you go back to the track, it then plays the correct track. So it's just like, how hard is it to make a music player that can play music in the order that it will play? It says it will play the music. It seems like we've kind of lost the art of playing music, which is sad. And that's the story of streaming services and why they all suck.
So what you're saying here is, what we need is Winamp in your car.
Well, I was saying that, back in COVID times, we made the web studio for UOI to do remote broadcasting, and then I made an in-studio version of that, which is just a Python program that plays a playlist of files, and it can cache them up, and you can change the order, you can do everything like that.
It
does
works.
waveforms. Yeah, it does waveforms. It's got multi-device support, so you can play from one and pause from another, and so on. It just doesn't work on mobile, and doesn't have the music library, unless I just continuously use UI's music library, but it may be somewhat suspicious and not have as much music of my taste as I would like.
And also not legal.
But there you go. Every music streaming service. Oh yeah, I also tried YouTube Music, which has a habit of finding songs that are just karaoke versions off YouTube. That were made on Windows Movie Maker at like 128 kilobit MP3. So that was immediately out of the out of the running.
So interesting that you talk about Spotify and its love for pop music, because while it may well be the case that I listen to more pop music than you, in fact that's probably the case, I feel like I've also over the years managed to train it more towards my very specific taste in pop music. So maybe it's a time thing, but yeah.
Maybe. I don't seem to remember it doing a very fancy onboarding thing, though. It just kind of
you just kind
jumped
of play
into it and went, you probably want this.
Tries to figure it out. So I'm still on Spotify. Cameron, out of the smorgasbord of streaming services that Matt presented, which ones do you use?
I'm an Apple Music user, and I always have been. I mean, what do you expect from me, really?
Yeah, fair. I did try Apple Music back when I got my first set of AirPods, the original generation AirPod Pros, and they were doing... It was either like a 3 or a 6 month trial. I mainly wanted to try it for all the Dolby Atmos stuff that they were doing with AirPods, which isn't real Atmos. We all know that. It's an emulation. But it was interesting that there were details in songs that I'd listened to many times before that I heard for the first time in the Atmos Master. But didn't really convince me to switch to it, and so I am still on Spotify. Speaking of switching... These links are getting more and more tenuous by the segment. Let's talk about X, baby.
Let's do it. So
that's
a
nice card, Cameron.
Thank you very much. It's time we talk about it properly. And okay, look, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I joined originally in like 2015. I started using it properly early when Trump took office, around sort of 2017, I think. And it became the way that I kept up with what was happening in the world. I follow thousands of people, which is how it's kind of most useful to me as a feed of like collected stream of consciousness from thousands of experts in their field and journalists and politicians. And then Elon Musk bought it. So, I don't want to spend ages doing a full timeline of all the awful stuff he's done since taking over. But
shall we go for a highlight reel?
He laid off a huge amount of the company and gave an ultimatum to all of the employees saying that the road ahead would be extremely hardcore, which has turned out to include insane hours, sleeping in the office, all of that. Fired the entire press and communications team, so now when you email them, it just sends you a poo emoji. Obviously, a lot of those people were techies, and so the site just started to break in all sorts of ways. Most notably, they introduced rate limiting for viewing posts to try and stop, scrapers or whatever, and then affected all users, and originally put in place a 600 post a day limit, which everyone hit immediately, and suddenly you could only see 600 posts a day on Twitter until they increased the limit 3 times and then removed it.
I believe at one point Musk personally walked into a data center and started pulling cables out of servers, going, "We don't need all these servers," which Twitter stayed up because its engineers had done a good job of putting in redundancy and automation. But I believe that at that point, some features like SMS two-factor authentication just didn't work because Musk had unplugged those servers. Well done.
And so there were people who logged out and then weren't able to log back in. Obviously, a lot of people that they got rid of were in the trust and safety team, which is insanely important and a ridiculous thing to do. And they've made all sorts of absurd decisions, like reinstating Britain First within hours of taking over, bringing Trump back to the platform, and they've seen a massive rise in hate speech as well, and obviously loads of spam and bots. It's almost unusable. And the worst thing is that content is prioritised because they introduced a pay-to-play scheme, originally called Twitter Blue, that is now X Premium, and you pay $8 a month for the blue check mark that previously meant verification and meant the person that you were looking at the post came from an authentic, verified public figure. And so obviously there was lots of impersonation in the early days of that. But then they also now have priority in replies, so it is literally pay to play, and that's a load of AI generated rubbish that is at the top of every thread now. And then this year he's made likes private, he's broken the block function, and steadily there's been this stream of people going, "No, you know what, I can't put up with this anymore." I've held out until now because all the people I follow on there that I really value hearing insight from are not anywhere else, and so I've put up with a lot even though I really didn't like it. And then of course he not only endorsed Donald Trump but joined his team and is now going to be leading a commission to cut the US federal government to shreds, and that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people. So there has been an exodus, pun intended. So let's talk a bit about the alternatives. You know, we have been very stubborn in continuing to call it Twitter because in addition to all the other stuff we just talked about, he took one of the world's most common brands. I mean, tweet and Google are the only two words that have kind of passed into common usage to that extent, and rebranded it to the letter X because he thinks it's cool because he's a 12-year-old child.
I believe the initial logo was literally a Unicode character because creativity. But
yes,
we were having an interesting conversation over dinner the other day, weren't we?
Yeah. And I said, you know, we've resisted this change and we've said, you know, we're going to keep calling it Twitter because it's Twitter. But he's changed so much and ruined it to such an extent that actually I think we should be calling it X. I think he has succeeded in what he set out to do, and so we should give it that name. But what I was saying is that actually, you know how certain brand names become genericized, right? So they start off as a product from a particular company, and then that company has such a monopoly, or everyone copies them, that we just adopt that word as the noun for that thing. So escalator is a particularly good example of, there was a company that made escalators as a trademark, and then slowly over time that just became the word for that product.
Sellotape is another good example. I think maybe Twitter should be in that category, and that we should broaden it. This is now called X. He has changed it, but we can have the concept of a Twitter, right? So all of these microblogging platforms are Twitters because they're fulfilling or aiming to fulfill the same function, really. You know, they were Twitter incorporated, but I think we're going to call them Twitters. So let's talk about some other Twitters. The first one that kind of came into view was Mastodon. Now, the big selling point here was that it was decentralized. It's part of something wider called the Fediverse, and it kind of all works at the protocol level, so you can communicate with people who are using different apps, kind of like the way email works.
And even before Moss took over, when there were kind of waves of migration initially due to moderation policies, Mastodon was where people went. But it was a bit too small and it was a bit too early. It was just unlucky timing, really.
I think
because there are people that use it still and use it happily, and very much good for them.
I think there's also the fact that one of the first decisions you have to make when you join Mastodon is you have to choose a home server, which is where all your data will reside. So either choose one of the big ones and you are beholden to their moderation policies, or you run your own, which is only really doable for techies who know a thing or two about managing servers, which in practice has meant that Mastodon it's the home of niche communities. Like, a lot of techies are there. A lot of, I think particularly LGBTQ people are on Mastodon because they can sort of have their own servers and allow the people they want on there, and they can choose to federate with other servers or choose to not federate with other servers.
And in fact, they can block whole other servers.
Yeah.
Which is important for safety reasons. But it just hasn't quite had mass adoption, particularly among journalists and politicians and kind of things that shape the public discourse and conversation. So, after it became apparent that Elon Musk was setting out to completely ruin X, Meta thought they'd have a crack at it, and they launched Threads. Now, their big idea was to attach it to Instagram as a sort of sister app, so that anyone with an Instagram account could very easily create a Threads account too, and it would follow everyone they follow on Instagram. Side note, I don't know why you'd want that, because I use Instagram for keeping in touch with people that I know, and I use Twitter for almost exclusively following, larger conversation, as we've been saying, and the overlap between those is quite small, and I think that might be one of its weaknesses. But despite that, it was the biggest consumer product launch in history until I think ChatGPT overtook it later that year. The user numbers skyrocketed, but not that many stuck around, because it was full of brands trying to be relatable and engagement bait, and it had issues with moderation. So, first of all, it never had just a following feed that you could see reverse chronological posts from everyone you follow. It was all algorithmic, and they did eventually bring that in, but it was quite hard to access. And they also made a baffling decision not to allow politics, or at least by default. And then it became a kind of opt-in switch, which is why a lot of people go to those platforms. So, Threads really just wasn't right.
I still scroll through Threads once in a while, but mostly just for memes or nonsense. It's definitely not the sort of place for the sort of things that you would use it for, Cameron.
I think I've clicked on Threads enough because it was accidentally clicked from Facebook.
Yes. Yeah, they promote it in all their other apps.
And it's not that I use Facebook. I use Facebook for the marketplace. Unfortunately, they try and hide Threads links everywhere, and you think, I can just click on that, and then you get booted into another app. It's also interesting with Threads how they're going to support the Fediverse, but only one direction.
Yeah, so your post can be seen on the Fediverse. So, you could find me on the Fediverse on my Threads on account, but I think they can't pull in posts from the Fediverse.
No, so I think you just can't. You can have an account as part of Instagram in Threads, but you can't migrate your external Fediverse account into your Threads account, or vice versa. So it's kind of like it's open, but it uses the open protocol proprietarily.
And lest we forget, it's still owned by Zuckerberg, who, despite the very surprising redemption arc over the last couple of years, which has purely been because he's not as bad as Musk,
which is not saying much.
Still someone who should really be running that sort of platform. So a new one has emerged. It was initially invite only, and actually what's really interesting is it was founded by Jack Dorsey, the same person who founded Twitter. He's no longer involved with it though. It was founded inside of Twitter as a sort of experiment of what if we broaden this out to a protocol level and made it more open. And they created a protocol called the App Protocol, and they created an app view for that called Bluesky. And that is what seems to be winning. And so my thesis is Bluesky is a Twitter that doesn't suck.
So,
And this is what I'm finding.
So should we talk a little bit
yeah, go on,
about
Max.
the protocol? Because the way that Bluesky
Yeah,
has
go on.
chosen to do things is a little bit interesting. So on the sort of spectrum of centralized to decentralized Twitters, you have X, where everything is on X's servers, and you can get data on external apps through the API, at least you could until Musk killed it. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have Mastodon, where everything runs on a server, and the task of pulling in, and it can federate with other servers, but the task of pulling in post from those other servers is still up to your server. And then Bluesky sits sort of somewhere in the middle, where you can host your own data using what they call PDSs, and when you sign up to Bluesky, you can either use Bluesky, the company's PDSs, or you can run your own. But then, essentially, the data from it gets aggregated at the layer that they call the app view, which is the Bluesky app will run its servers, and that everyone using Bluesky uses, and then they pull in data from all of the PDSs and then render it as an app for you. And you can have third-party clients. For example, Graysky exists. There's the one I use on my iPad. I can't remember what it's called. Skeets is the one I use on my iPad because I find it has a better iPad.
Which, by the way, we should say, Skeets is the word for tweets on Bluesky, and Toots is the word for tweets on Mastodon.
So the idea being...
Threads is boring and just calls them posts.
So you can have custom clients that interface with anyone's PDSs because everything is done through the so-called lexicon, which is essentially the schema for data on the app protocol. And you can write other apps on it as well. Bluesky is just the first and the most popular one. So on the centralized, decentralized spectrum, it's definitely more on the decentralized side, but less so than Mastodon.
So my big question is, I kind of moved away from X. I don't really post there anymore, and I was convinced to join a Mastodon. Haven't really used that much either. Should I bother with Bluesky or not?
Depends on what you want from it.
Probably nothing.
In that case, no. Easy.
Apart from, I don't know, I have a website that currently has my Twitter profile on it, and LinkedIn, which is yet another thing that I don't really check very much. So I don't know whether I should have something else instead of Twitter, and I don't know what it should be.
So my argument is it should be Bluesky, and there are kind of a few reasons for that. People keep saying Bluesky has the juice. Well, for one thing, it has 20 million users, and counting. It's been increasing by about 1 million a day recently as people flee X.
Which has been really interesting.
Election.
It's been really interesting to watch the feeds of their infrastructure team as they scale it.
One thing that's really helped is they have a feature called starter packs, which mean you can essentially, anyone can make them. They're like lists on Twitter, except they have a follow all button. And so someone can recommend, hey, follow these folks, up to 150 of them, and you can follow them all in a button press. And that is why I'm now following 10,700 people on Bluesky. And another thing to note is engagement has been really good on that, because partially they're all real people interested in actually talking to each other. And so things like links and promotion are getting better numbers on Bluesky than on X, despite having a fraction of the follow count. Obviously, it's open, so it's extensible. Someone built something that will find as many as it can of your people you're following on Twitter and follow them on Bluesky, which got me several thousand accounts in as a kind of head start, including most of the ones that I actually care about hearing from. And there are tools that will find people that lots of people you follow, but you don't follow, to kind of expand your network. There are directories of those starter packs. People are building all sorts of things around it, including big user number counters with confetti when they cross each million, which is quite fun. And people can also build their own, what are called labelers. So this is sort of a way of letting people pick and choose what they want in terms of moderation. First of all, there are just switches, so the built-in moderation, you can kind of customize it to your liking, but then also you can subscribe to these accounts that will label other accounts with warnings. Another fun thing, and a kind of form of self-verification, is that if you have a domain, you can pretty easily use that as your username on Bluesky.
So like how my username on
Mark's
Bluesky is markspolikovs.me, which is the Marks wiki, but is also my username on Bluesky.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so people seeing that know that it must be you because they know that you have access to that domain.
And you can also do some interesting hacks with it, because it doesn't just have to be on the domain, it can be also verified through HTTP through a page on the domain. Which means that one of the interesting things that happen in the Exodus is the Swiftie community collectively migrated to Bluesky, which was really interesting to watch, and was one of the things that made me think, okay, yeah, this might be real this time. And what someone did is that they built swifties.social, which lets you get your chosen username .swifties.social handle on Bluesky through some clever hackery around HTTP. I think I described it as the intersection of DevOps and Swifties we never knew we needed or deserved.
My final question.
Yeah.
What's the bot situation like? Not because I'm thinking of, we used to have at UI the now playing bot that used to post, and that eventually got killed off by Musk's API restrictions and all that.
Yes.
Can we bring it back?
Probably.
And
Yeah,
can
good
it be
bots
on
are
Bluesky?
welcome. If anyone remembers the Infinite Scream account from Twitter that would just post random screams at random times and scream back at you if you replied to it, that is on Bluesky. If you need any more reason.
Nice.
Which also means because of the
So,
domain names,
I mean,
we can do things like have... I don't know if... I probably haven't moved over, but if URY were to move over, they could have their Bluesky account be ury.org.uk, but then that one be nowplaying.ury.org.uk on Bluesky.
Yeah, like you, Marks, I've got my hopes up time and time again that people might actually be moving away, and I know I've said it before, but Bluesky is a Twitter that doesn't suck.
Yeah, the thing that sort of sold it for me is that I've seen mainstream journalists move over and use it in anger. Like, the sort of people that you would see on The Beeb or LBC or whatever, posting there exactly like they used to on X. I think nowadays a lot of them are still cross-posting, so posting on both, but the fact that the content is there and that you can follow it from an app that isn't associated with Musk is definitely a positive.
And there's shitposting, there's a sense of humour and irony that was one of the things that Threads always felt that it lacked. It felt very earnest in comparison to Twitter.
I think I'll give it a few months, and if it hasn't blown up or exploded by then, I'll try it.
And speaking of a few months, I think that brings us towards the end of this show. In a little bit of a different format, we should probably acknowledge the elephant in the room. We're not all in the same living room, chatting nonsense to cameras with a gallery very close off screen, close enough to be heard, laughing their heads off. November turned out to be a very busy month for all of us, and so we just couldn't quite make the timings work, but don't you worry, we will be back soon, spouting nonsense into a hastily arranged, almost but not quite professional-seeming live streaming setup in someone's living room very, very soon. Until next time, I've been Marks.
I've been Matt Strat.
I've been Cameron.
That's been Corey Slap with a Steak. Jamie was here. Goodbye.